Hi there, I'm Andrew, you're watching That Gamer Ajax, and welcome to this week's video where we're going to be talking about another class in sci-fi tabletop role-playing game, Veil of the Void, with the Mechromancer. The easiest way to describe this very tanky class is that it is basically the combination of a paladin and a necromancer from other role-playing games. It's the easiest way to describe it. It is capable of doing a massive amount of burst damage and has some very interesting roleplay bits due to the way that these classes work in general based on their lore. So let's just go ahead and dive right into some of the basics of this class and why it might be one that you want to look into. So starting with the strengths, Mechromancers are one of the burstiest casting classes in the game. Now, the way that they work is that as enemies die, you're able to kind of harvest their souls and use those to fuse you into your spells, allowing you to wield a whole bunch of death magic. Now, the way that this works in game is that you don't have a whole lot of utility, but you do have an absurd amount of damage that usually comes in the form of good AoE spells and abilities, or you can augment your own attacks. That way you can either hit something that's a little bit further away or hit for a lot more damage. Now, this is also a class that is naturally tanky due to having the Ether Garb, which is a class ability that you get relatively early in the game. The way that this ability works is that enemies are going to be rolling less die to be able to hit you, which means that you're already kind of naturally tanky and you don't have to invest extra into getting, heavier armor so that way you're harder to hit. The way that Mechromancers truly thrive is during a long combat encounter. If there's a lot of enemies on the field, anytime that an enemy dies is when you can kind of, get some of that essence into your weapons and start carrying that around that you can use in a wide variety of ways. The more enemies there are, the more you're going to be topped off. This is also a class that is able to thrive at either close range or ranged, depending on how you want to play your character, but be warned, this is one of the only power classes that is currently in the game, so you're going to really want to be investing in heavy ranged weapons if that's the option that you want to be able to go into. Mechromancers are also one of the only classes in the game that is able to do a true kind of summoning. By using some of that essence that we talked about earlier, you're able to sacrifice a little bit of your maximum health, and you're able to summon a combination of a robotic undead creature that can help you out during a fight. Now, these do take on some of the traits of slain enemies, so really keep an eye out on what has been killed around you if you want to be using one of these things. Mechromancers are also the only class in the game that has access to ether spells. In the lore, the ether is kind of the realm of death, and because you are a Mechromancer, you can only have access to these spells. None of the other classes are able to use it in this way. Mechromancers also have three very interesting archetypes when you get into your specializations, which the way that Veil of the Void works is that you hit that at level 5. You can focus on summoning if you want to be a spirit commander, which means that you have more of those undead minions under your control. You can focus on hunting and tracking and being one with the dark if you decide to play as an Aetherist. You get an absurd amount of burst damage if you choose to play as the Wraithlord, which kind of almost tears its soul in half and has a little bit of a shadow clone that is there to help you do an insane amount of burst damage by echoing the damage that you're already doing. Now, when it comes to the general weaknesses of the Mechromancer, this is unfortunately a little bit more of a complicated class. You have a lot of things that you need to be keeping track of between cooldowns, for your abilities, the amount of spells that you have cast, the amount of essence that you are collecting through slain enemies. So if you're relatively new to the game and you are looking for something simple, this might not be a class that you're really going to look into. Now, because I mentioned earlier that this is a power-based class, this generally comes in the form of using melee weapons. The way that Veil of the Void works is that if you go in, you have to use your finesse trait in order to use a lot of the ranged weapons. So if you're going to be using heavy weapons, such as one-handed or two-handed weapons, or if you want to use something like a shotgun, that is something that you can do if you want to be ranged. And lastly, Mechromancers really focus on damage more than utility. They do get a couple of spells that allow, if you have an ally that goes down, you can kind of preserve their body and their spirits, that way they don't just bleed out. And you do have a little bit of crowd control, but largely your spells are going to focus on the abilities that you have to do damage. This is a class that the motto is easily a good offense is the best defense. So in conclusion, if you want to kind of play an archetype that is a little bit like an edgy class, I would highly recommend the Mechromancer to you. However, if you want something that's a little bit more simple, maybe avoid this one until you understand the game's mechanics a little bit better. It does have a lot to offer in terms of roleplay and combat, so make sure that you're really working with your game master to be able to really bring this class out to its maximum effect. So I want to go ahead and reach out to the community that I've got, and what are some interesting mashups that you'd like to see? As I mentioned earlier, the Necromancer is a class that focuses kind of on mashing together the Paladin and Necromancer. Or what are some other mashups that you would just like to see in general? Maybe that's something that you can work with your GM to build in this kind of game. So don't forget to check out some of the other videos that I have made regarding Veil of the Void. It's a tabletop game that is small, but I absolutely love it. And if you wouldn't mind subscribing, it would be much appreciated. All right, thanks for your time. Bye.